you guys today, how much longer will this united front of the players union stay united as bills pile up, as cars get repossessed, as they begin to get kicked out of their apartment complexes? How much longer until the 10th, 11th woman on the roster, the ones who make 80,000?
Here's the situation that has WNBA executives losing sleep. The Players Union just flexed with a 97% strike authorization vote, but dig deeper and you'll find a massive fault line running right through the middle of this so-called solidarity. 2/3 of the league's roster isn't part of Unrivaled. They're not collecting those fat $220,000 checks for 2 months of basketball. Instead, they're watching their savings evaporate while the superstars are living comfortably.
Oh, this is an article by the Sports Business Journal. Talks between the WNBA and Players Association have stalled, and the union's, quote, upper hand at the bargaining table is slipping as soon as the players will be faced with the question of how long they can hold out, according to Adam Minter of Bloomberg News. It is a necessary but dispiriting thought, considering that the leverage was well earned.
Something just dropped from Sports Business Journal that should have the Players Association sweating bullets. Their breakdown exposes exactly how shaky this whole situation really is. The union's power is crumbling by the day. Here's what everyone's missing about these negotiations. When Caitlin Clark burst onto the scene, these players suddenly had real bargaining power for the first time ever. Packed arenas, explosive ratings, that monster media contract. But here's the catch. That power comes with an expiration date. And right now, we're watching the countdown in real time.
By well earned, we mean Caitlin Clark showed up and they suddenly had some leverage in their pocket. Publicly, the Players Association is presenting a united front, but the outward appearance masks a complex private reality. Many players can't afford to wait indefinitely. Unrivaled provides a lens for understanding the divide. This season, 54 top WNBA hoopers, about a third of the WNBA's active rosters in 2025, are participating in Unrivaled. For them, Unrivaled and its big paychecks of roughly $220,000 for an 8-week season are a nice cushion while negotiations.
Let's break down these numbers. This year, 54 elite WNBA players, roughly 1/3 of all active rosters, are getting paid through Unrivaled. They're banking around $220,000 for 8 weeks of work. That's a pretty sweet safety net when contract talks get messy. But what about the other 100 players? The ones grinding for $80,000 base salaries. The role players grinding off the bench. The 11th and 12th spots on each roster. No endorsement money flowing in. No unrivaled paychecks. These are the players who'll crack under financial stress first.
AKA, they're going to dry up on their savings. AKA, they're going to need money. AKA, they got bills. A WNBA lockout or strike also poses economical risks for the WNBA. The league is in a much stronger financial position than its players to withstand a protracted delay or cancellation. Well, no shit. Pardon my language. Duh. Now, Natasha Cloud actually spoke about this before, and we've talked about this, that the players in Unrivaled, they don't really care about the other 100 players in the league.
This dynamic gets wild when you really think about it. Natasha Cloud actually called this out before. The Unrivaled players, let's keep it real, they couldn't care less about those other 100 players in the league. If a lockout hits, they're golden. They'll just stretch out the Unrivaled season, pocket more cash, keep hooping, life stays comfortable. But those role players, complete different universe. Bills keep coming, car notes due, rent checks bouncing. Eventually, that 97% solidarity starts falling apart.
They just want to get paid all the money that they feel that they missed during the NIL era. That's what a lot of this is, along with ego. A lot of this is players that missed the NIL era, sees Caitlin Clark. They don't want to admit it, but she's the dollar signs here. And they say, well, this is our only chance, really. This is our only chance that we're going to be able to cash in. Let's try our best.
So much of this mess comes down to pride and missed chances. Most of these veterans completely missed the NIL explosion. They sat there watching college kids rake in millions while they were overseas grinding for $70,000 annually. Then Caitlin Clark shows up, and suddenly real money starts flowing into women's basketball. This might be their only shot, their last chance to get paid, so they're going all in, demanding 30% of gross revenue with a $10.5 million salary cap. Problem is, they might be pushing too hard.
Talking about WNBA could be weeks away from delaying season. Despite releasing the schedule earlier this week, the WNBA likely needs to agree to a CBA by February to start the season on time. The WNBA wants everybody to believe the 2026 season will tip off on May 8th. It asserted as much with an announcement of a 44-game slate and a statement that explained in part the move was to allow, quote, essential planning to begin. The reality of where collective bargaining agreement negotiations stands paint a different picture.
The league's current offer actually looks pretty solid. Max salary hitting $1 million, climbing past $1.3 million, plus revenue sharing built in. They're putting roughly 70% of net revenue on the table across the entire deal. Salary cap kicks off at $5 million in year one and grows as the league makes more money. That's a massive jump from where things stand now. But the union wants more. They want gross revenue instead of net revenue, which creates a fundamental gap that could cost hundreds of millions.
Come on, Brad. Maybe they'll get the point and send us something better. But remember, Breanna Stewart yesterday said, oh, they're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. How can you see the light at the end of the tunnel, you liar? Yeah, whatever. In that proposal, the union is seeking a 30% share of the league's gross revenue and a salary cap of $10.5 million. The league's latest proposal includes a max base salary of $1 million, which would increase to more than $1.3 million with revenue share. The league's proposing roughly 70% of its net revenue over the span of the deal. The salary cap would be at $5 million in year one and would grow in tandem with the league's revenue.
Let's talk about what's really on the line here. Annie Costabile's reporting suggests the WNBA might delay the season within weeks, even though they just dropped the schedule. 44 games, starting May 8, but the behind-the-scenes reality tells a completely different story. As of January 23rd, the Players' Union was still waiting on the league's response to a proposal they sent almost a month earlier. That proposal went out before Christmas. They went through the entire holiday break. 2 full years of talks, and here we sit in late January with complete radio silence from the league.
Best case scenario for free agency would be early March, and that's if the ink dries on a new CBA by early February, giving the WNBA the rest of the month to plan and conduct an expansion draft. Multiple league sources believe the best case scenario would be early March, given the ink dries by early February. We are about 2 weeks away from early February. February's in 7 days. 8 days. 2 weeks, we're sitting what? February 5th? February 6th? They need to get a deal soon before we start pushing the schedule back.
Breanna Stewart's recent comments start looking pretty strange when you consider this timeline. Yesterday, she claimed they're beginning to see light at the end of the tunnel. But how exactly do you see progress when the league hasn't even acknowledged your proposal in 30 days? That's not movement forward. That's a complete standstill. Meanwhile, general managers are flying blind on expansion draft rules. Toronto Tempo and Portland Fire need to understand how to construct their rosters. But planning anything becomes impossible without a finalized CBA. The core designation system, basically the WNBA's version of a franchise tag, remains stuck in negotiations. That uncertainty could dramatically change which players become available in the expansion draft.
However, in the middle of free agency, front offices will also be preparing for the 2026 WNBA draft, currently held April 13th. The league has never lost games to a work stoppage in its 29-year history. The next 2 weeks will be an indicator of whether its 30th season will be the first time it does. If the deal doesn't get done soon, might not be a lockout, there might not be a strike, but at the bare minimum, they're going to need to delay the season or start chopping some games off. Instead of a 44 game, it'll be a 38 game. They missed the first 6 games because they push it back 2 weeks. They mixed the first 10 games because they push it back a month.
League insiders think free agency's best-case scenario lands in early March. But that only works if they get ink on a new CBA by early February. We're 7 days from February starting. That leaves maybe 2 weeks to hammer out a deal, finalize every piece of legal language, and get signatures on contracts. Then they'd need the entire month of February to organize and execute an Anson draft. Normally, free agency launches in early January with major signings wrapped up by early February. We're massively behind that standard timeline. Training camp starts April 19th. The draft happens April 13th. Everything's backing up like a traffic jam.
Earlier, how much longer will that 97% of players that agreed with the strike dwindles to 90%, dwindles to 80%, dwindles to 65%? Might not be able to vote again. I doubt they can vote on that again. But the rumblings and the talk behind the scene, it'll get back to them. And they'll say, damn, we're not really united anymore. These girls fractured and they don't agree with it anymore. And they're kind of starving and they need to pay for this and she needs to pay for that. And let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. I appreciate it.
Here's the real situation developing. If no deal materializes soon, we're not necessarily staring at a complete lockout or strike, but at minimum, they'll have to push back the season or start cutting games. Instead of 44 games, maybe it becomes 38 because they lose the first 6 games with a 2-week delay, or maybe 34 games because they push everything back a full month. The league has never lost games to labor disputes in 29 years of existence. The next 2 weeks determine whether season 30 becomes the first exception, which brings us back to the core question. How long does that unity actually last? Right now, it's sitting at 9, but what happens when it slides to 90%, then 80%? They probably can't hold another strike authorization vote. But the whispers behind closed doors will reach leadership. The stars will realize their leverage is disappearing because half the league no longer backs the strategy. Consider the impossible position this creates for role players. They're being asked to sacrifice their financial survival so Breanna Stewart and Nneka Ogwumike can negotiate for maximum salaries they'll never touch. The new CBA could boost base salaries from $80,000 to $250,000. That's completely life-altering money for the 12th player on any roster, but only if there's actually a season to participate in. If they strike or face a lockout, that money vanishes. Their rent doesn't vanish. Their car payments don't vanish. Their student loans don't vanish. The unrivaled players can afford to wait this out. They're earning more in 8 weeks than most WNBA players make in 12 months. They can extend their season, keep collecting paychecks, and treat these negotiations like a minor annoyance. But for everyone else, this represents their livelihood. This is how they cover their expenses. Eventually, they're going to look at Breanna Stewart and A'ja Wilson and Sabrina Ionescu and realize something. You don't actually care about us. You care about maximizing your own earnings. What makes this especially frustrating is that the league's offer genuinely looks good. Not perfect, but legitimately good. $1 million max salary represents a huge leap from current numbers. 70% of net revenue is substantial money. The salary cap growing with league revenue means players benefit directly when the league succeeds. But the union keeps holding out for 30% of gross revenue, which changes the entire calculation. Gross revenue ignores operating costs, league expenses, or investments in growth. It's asking for a slice of money before the league even covers its bill. The NBA gives players roughly 50% of basketball-related income, but that's BRI, not gross revenue. It's a carefully negotiated definition that excludes specific costs and expenses. WNBA players want 30% of gross, which in many ways actually becomes more aggressive than the NBA's 50% of BRI when you factor in the different calculations. And they're making this demand while the league still operates at a loss, still gets subsidized by the NBA, still tries to establish financial independence. Look, I completely understand player frustration. They've been underpaid for decades. They've watched the NBA generate billions while they scraped by. They've had to play overseas just to earn decent money. I get all of that. But there's a massive difference between fighting for fair compensation and overplaying your hand so badly that you walk away with nothing. Right now, the union is dangerously close to that line, because here's reality: if they delay or cancel the season, they lose all momentum. Caitlin Clark's rookie impact was lightning in a bottle. Those ratings, that attendance, all the media attention. that doesn't just pause and restart when you're ready. Fans move on to other things. Casual viewers disappear. Sponsors get nervous. The WNBA finally had mainstream attention, and they're risking all of it over the difference between a good deal and a great deal. The league has more leverage than most people realize. Yes, they need the players, but they can also afford to wait. They're backed by NBA money. They have deep pockets. They can survive a delayed season, or even a canceled season, better than players can. And they absolutely know it. That's exactly why they're leaving the union's proposal on read for 30 days. They're waiting for pressure to build, for cracks to appear, for those role players to start asking uncomfortable questions. And those questions are definitely coming. When the 10th player on the roster can't make her car payment, she's gonna wonder why she's sacrificing for Breanna Stewart's maximum salary. When the 11th player gets an eviction notice, she's gonna question whether this strike authorization really served her best interest. When the 12th player is eating ramen for dinner because her savings disappeared, she's gonna realize that unrivaled players aren't feeling any pain whatsoever. That's exactly when the union's position collapsed, not because the league made a better offer, but because players can't afford to keep fighting. That's precisely what the league is counting on. They're playing the long game, knowing time works in their favor, knowing that financial pressure will eventually shatter the union's unity. It's cold and calculated, and it's probably going to work. So the real question isn't whether players deserve more money. They absolutely do. The question is whether they're willing to risk everything they've already gained by holding out for a deal that might not exist. Because if this negotiation drags into March, into April, if they start canceling games or delaying the season, they might look back and realize they had a solid offer sitting on the table, and let it slip away while chasing something perfect.